Okay, today in this video, we are coming back actually to kind of the classic. We're going to be doing an Ara'kara commentary. This was a plus 20 pug that I did the other day. Speaking of which, I should probably pull up the build I was running. So for those who have been kind of maybe keeping track, I haven't really done live keys this season. I was fortunate enough to be invited by just a BattleNet friend to a plus 20 the other night that we happened to time, which was super cool. So I'm going to leave this link down below. I'm trying to pull up my talent build so I can quickly talk about it. The Brewmaster setup this season seems to be pretty static across the board. The only notable things that for some reason this talent calculator isn't showing is I was running Clash in lieu of Black Ox statue and pressure point swapped for detox, but I just reset my tree with that. Fucking awesome. So that was pretty much it. I know you guys always ask for me to show my build at the start of the key, so I'm trying to do that this time. I'm a little rusty, not gonna lie, when it comes to these higher keys. There is a lot to kind of talk about in this run specifically, and I'm gonna try to mention all of it throughout. One last thing I want to note is over on my Patreon page, I have posted a video, or I've posted this run with just like kind of me talking to myself while in the run. So if you want to hear my internal dialogue, you can go check that out. You don't have to be a Patreon supporter. I think it's over there posted for free. It's just over on that site. Anyways, talking about this first pull, because I think this is probably the hardest thing about Ara'kara, in my opinion. We are running Fury Warrior, BM Hunter, Frosty K, so like a fairly meta composition outside of the fact that I'm playing Brewmaster, and setting up this first pull is kind of hard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get threat immediately on these first set of crawlers, and then keg smash them mid-air so I can continue my momentum. I'm then going to tag the second and third set of crawlers, making sure I apply a keg smash, reapply Rushing Jade Wind, tag the close and far flyers here, and then we are using Weapons of Order early. Now, for overall damage in this pull or for the key, it would be better to hold, but I was trying to make sure that I was holding threat, because threat can be also a little goofy here if you have anyone hit any button while trying to ramp up. We land a frozen trap on the patrolling attendant, and then we grip in the other attendant with an asphyxiate. So that was a really good heads up play. The problem is if you grip it right away, the attendant will sometimes melee the mob, the enemy that grips it, aka the DK, before casting. Now in this poll, I believe the Hunter is watching the Fear, and we are just blowing this pack up. Obviously, BM Hunter is very, very strong in these situations, so this poll actually gets somewhat deleted. The hardest part about this run is getting to the mini-boss with threats, and with no one dying to flyer leaps. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a ton of funnel damage. For example, like we don't have the very, very overpowered Havoc Demon Hunter in this comp. So the mini bosses and later on the Blood Guards are going to last for a fairly long bit, which ends up hurting us over the course of the key. The DK then grips in the second attendant that was frozen trap still / paralysis, and we are now going to continue kind of working on its health bar. You want to generally not try to kick the attendant. The attendant you want to save other CCs for, because once the channel starts, you can use leg sweep, death grip, paralysis, blinding sleet, shockwave, stuff like that to stop the channel. Then where you can then allocate your kicks to interrupting the actual web bolts, which are way more scary in these dungeons. I'm going to get a paralysis on one of the attendants and trying to get the rest of these crawlers onto the current attendant that we still have live in the poll. My general train of thought, especially when pugging, is if we can keep kicks to a minimum, that is the best way to go about it. So CCing a mob out isn't the worst thing ever. Now, it's not like I engaged any other pack or mob that was near this. It wouldn't have pulled anyways, but keeping it parried was more of a kind of a safety net. Now, one thing you'll notice is I kept two crawlers up to my right, kind of towards the second boss area. And what we're going to be doing is pulling those crawlers later on to boss and killing them during the boss fight. Anything you can pull onto Avanoxx will give you not only a little bit of funnel for any class that does happen to have it, but it also just makes trash a little bit more efficient. Avanoxx, I think, is a much watered down version of its former self back in Season 1, where this was easily the hardest fight in here. I no longer think... Actually, I don't think any bosses in here are necessarily hard. Things can definitely still go wrong on Avanoxx, but I think generally speaking, at least in the high end of play, most players are competent in working with the mechanics, whether it's dodging swirls, stacking up, being between the boss and the ads that are spawning, etc. Now we're getting pretty aggressive here. I do see that we have both Rec just got popped, and we also have the DK's CDs with Breath and Pillar of Frost. So I am getting ready to go on to the mini boss here once I am kind of ready to go. I was just making sure a couple of these mobs were a little bit lower before chaining. So this is probably the hardest mini boss still. It used to be the hardest mini boss back in the day. The issue is when Nact, which is the mini boss's name, does Call of the Brood, it spawns a bunch of crawlers that leap around like crazy. Now there, I deployed a leg sweep to prevent them from meleeing to buy me 3 seconds to get threat, which ended up working out. Now the problem is more often than not, you're going to see 2, maybe 3 Call of the Broods, depending on the level of the key and your overall damage. So the second Call of the Brood, unfortunately, will not go the same way. I tried to deploy a ring. The ring, unfortunately, was not good enough, and our warrior ended up dying there. Now, what should have happened, obviously this is a pug, so we couldn't communicate that. Probably a shockwave or a blinding sleet or even an incap or any type of CC would have helped someone getting melee there. It's just really inconvenient that the mobs spawn below the platform, and it's really difficult to get quick snap threat in that situation. So no worries, we just use the battle res and we are on our way. So pretty standard pull. Caster, a couple crawlers, all the flyers onto the third mini boss. Now this third mini boss outside of the frontal only will ever cast the poison bolt on the tank. So if the tank is going to be healthy here, you can let the poison bolt go off, allowing everyone else to just focus on kicking the attendant and the web bolt. If you're a Prout warrior, you can spell reflect the poison bolt and get a ton of damage, so definitely keep an eye out for that. If you're a super degenerate warrior who plays DPS, you could also taunt reflect and then taunt back, but that's obviously for like high coordinated groups. This pull doesn't have a lot going on. The only thing your entire group needs to be careful of are these poison clouds on the ground. They slightly shift around a yard or two, and so if you're not really paying attention, it's pretty easy to get clipped, which if there's any kind of cascading effect or you end up standing in it too long like I do right here, you could easily perish. Now, I quickly moved out of it, but also I'm a tank. I could probably stand in it for a good bit of time without fearing too much, but if you happen to get clipped by it, it could easily lead to a death, which is not good, because you want to go from here pretty much into boss as quickly as you can. Now, if you're a keen eye viewer, you might notice that I am running Soulbinder's Embrace. This is a defensive trinket from the raid from Soulbinder Nazrindi. It is a very bad trinket. I was running it as a safety net. That's pretty much it. I will admit to being bad. I'm rusty. I'm washed up. Plus, when I'm pugging with a healer, if I can minimize the amount of healing that they need to do to me, or lower the risk of me dying, I would much rather fail a key by a couple of seconds with but with no tank death, because if the tank dies, the group dies in most cases. Anyways, pretty big boss going, pretty big pull going on a boss here. Sorry, I'll come back to Soulbinder's Embrace in a second. The idea here is that you want to wait for the poisons. You kind of want to stagger these mobs into the boss so you can stagger the poisons being desynced from the AoE damage that Avanoxx is doing. Also, we do have 3 crawlers here. This can be pretty scary. Luckily, we have the Hunter who has the ability to dispel, and the Tank who has the ability to pre-AMS immune if needed. And we have access to 2 dispels. So this isn't super scary. Now, if you're playing a comp that doesn't have as many poison dispels as this one does, I might reconsider doing 3 crawlers on the boss like I'm doing here. No more than 2 is probably fine, and there's definitely ways to split it up. Now, one other thing you'll notice that we're doing is we're positioning between the boss and the eggs, and if everyone stacks here, the melee from the ads don't really run the risk of one-shotting you anymore because they can no longer crit. So as long as everyone just stays still right on top of where the tank is positioned, he should never eat the ads, and it should be nice and easy. And then you're already pre-positioned to be stacked, so you can move to either the left or the right to dodge swirls. So unfortunately, because we are in a pug, we both have different ideas of which way we should run, and unfortunately we kind of made a U shape. We went either direction and not towards. So I'm going to utilize Avanoxx's kind of leap tank buster mechanic, the Voracious Bite, to reposition him or her to the other side of the eggs here, pull the last 2 crawlers, and we're going to get nice and stacked up here. Now, ads will not fixate the tank unless there's a player who is dead. So with these ads, or with everyone being alive, the ads aren't fixating me, so where I'm positioned doesn't matter as much. I definitely want to be nearby so I can benefit from the damage. I also want to apply Mystic Touch for our warrior and for our hunter. So there's benefits for the tank sitting near the egg. Now, luckily here, we kind of stay stacked, but we had a bad egg spawn, which forced us to kind of walk back over the webs on the ground. Now, luckily, the webs don't do a ton, if any, damage, if I remember correctly. They just slow you. So getting across it isn't that big of a deal. We just want to make sure everyone is over here before... Yep. Okay, so our Druid used Tiger Dash to get over here. I was kind of waiting for a wild charge, but Tiger Dash is also a great ability to use. I'm going to dispel our Druid here. I'm kind of paying attention to those dispels when possible and when I can actually allocate the global. And now, unfortunately, our warrior here got clipped by kind of a rogue swirl. So he got clipped, unfortunately. He, I believe, said he was kind of like, hey, someone moved early. But honestly, swirls can spawn not on players, but nearby players as well. If you ever pay attention to the Gossamer Onslaught, they spawn kind of everywhere in the room, not just on players. And so there is a chance for a rogue swirl to spawn in kind of a bad location. You always want to be looking at your feet and not at your action bar. So as you can see, even over there, one spawned behind the boss. Some are spawning behind the boss here. It is random. So you do need to be a little careful. Obviously stacking is ideal, but being able to react to those like slight movements is key. Anyways, it's not going to be too bad. I think these are the only 2 deaths we have in the run, and we're going to time it with like a minute left, give or take. And we're also going to be short percent. I think I needed to pull an extra 0.7% here. I just forgot a pack of flyers. Anyways, back to Soulbinder's Embrace. This is a trinket that will, at least for me, did about 5% of my overall. In terms of healing, it did about 0.2% of my overall damage, so not a very valuable trinket. But like I said, when I'm running with a healer that I don't know or don't trust, because I just haven't run with them enough, I don't want my deaths to be the reason we wipe. And if I haven't played with a healer before, I don't know how aggressive or defensive they play in terms of making sure that I'm healthy or the group's healthy or prioritizing the group over the tank. Especially with how strong Protection Warrior is this season and seemingly never taking damage, I don't know how people play with Brewmasters. So it was a safety pick. I wouldn't run this in the future. I would run something like Curstone Idol if I had one, or Nether Prism. It's actually been really, really, really fun to use. You can sync it up with Chi Bursts. You can sync it up with your Exploding Kegs. You can sync it up with Shadow Flurry Strikes, or you can sync it up with your cooldown windows, i.e. Weapons of Order or Black Ox. This pull is going to go down pretty quick. Average full bridge pull. The main thing you want to keep an eye out for here is obviously the AoE damage from the Blood Guard, but also you want to make sure you're keeping an eye on the Attendant, or the Web Mage, I guess, who is casting Bolts and the Revolting Volley, which is a pretty nasty poison, AoE, that if it goes off, you're probably going to wipe. So as long as you lock that down, Web Bolts, as long as they're not one-shotting people, aren't the worst thing, but there's sometimes other damage in a pull going out. Sorry if you get distracted by me kind of swinging in my chair. So we did end up gripping in the Stag Shell to the left. I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't even going to pull that pack next, but gripping it in, it was in the route, and it was eventually going to come in. I just didn't plan on pulling it that early. So I had to kind of react to get quick threat there, so a quick tab target followed by Keg Smashes ended up being fine. Now that we have only one Web Mage, we're going to start walking this one over to the Attendant and the Bloodworkers. And kind of same rule to follow here is, if possible, you want to minimize the amount of casters you have in a pull. At least that's what I like to do in pugs. If I was playing Prop Paladin, I might be a little bit more aggressive, but I'm not playing Prop Paladin, and I don't trust everyone to play so well where we're all reacting to kicks, because I don't know these people, if I'm being quite frank. I've played with Deeps a good bit, and then Reeler was the one who invited me to the key, but I have no idea who Snoop is, or Cubby K. Anyways, I saw that we had Breath Up, Call the Wild, and Avatar, so what I end up doing is pulling everything together here. I did CC out the Web Mage because we still had a Web Mage up, I believe, or it died. I don't actually see it. I think it died. But having the stag shell means we also need to make sure we're CCing. So keeping the one web mage out, I don't think was the worst play here, but we probably could have gotten it in. Now we did grip, but I ringed on it, so that's kind of my bad. I'm kind of used to DKs in pugs not gripping things immediately, so oftentimes what I'll do is I'll ring it to get it closer or clash. But in this case, I kind of overlapped there and it bugged it out. But no worries, all of those cooldowns plus Lust deleted that Blood Guard, which is probably the second of 3 Blood Guards we had to kind of remove here. And again, kind of similar rule, Web Mage must be close to dying or dead before I go into a new Web Mage. So we're kind of waiting for that to happen here. As for my cooldowns, Weapons of Order and my Black Ox, I'm kind of just sending on cooldown. I'm not really holding for anything in particular. The more uses you can get, the better. And especially because we're getting cooldown reduction through spending energy, we definitely want to be aggressive with our CDs. I'm being a little bit more lax on my defensive usage because I'm putting a lot of weight and stock into Celestial Infusion and Soulbinder's Embrace being a short cooldown. I don't feel like I use Fortifying Brew or Dampen Harm all that much throughout this run, and I can't really point out any times where I do use it. The scariest pull in here for the Brewmaster would probably be the first pull, and I would say the last pull of the dungeon before we go into boss, which I'll point out when we get there. So right there, I rolled out to Clash because I saw that we had no kicks available to stop the Revolting Volley until kicks came back up. And now that there's just 2 assistants, we are slowly waddling over to this final patrol, which we are going to engage. Grip the Stag Shell over. The DK did a good job at that. I figured he would. He's been good this dungeon, so I figured he would know what's up. He did. It was good. And now we're just trying to rotate kicks the best we can. Like I said, this is a full pug. We are not in comms for this, so we're somewhat YOLOing that. We somehow got lucky with a double Spell Reflect there when no kicks were available. Now kicks are back up, so I'm going to kind of deploy one onto my target. And then, unfortunately, the Ardruid overlapped, but no biggie. At least they're kicking, which is good. Love it when Ardruids are aggressive with their Skull Bash. Rest in peace. Healer kicks are going away in midnight as of right now, at the time of recording this video. I'm not against it. I hope that they take a better, have a better design philosophy in terms of dungeons and the amount of casters going forward. Same thing here. I kind of expected him to grip the stag shells together, which he did, which is exactly what you should do. Get them nice and stacked, then you can use CC like we used Blinding Sleet and Leg Sweep there to sync them. I shouldn't have Leg Sweeped, but I kind of assumed he was going to grip and then that was it, because he wants to do damage, which is totally fair. I was saving my Leg Sweep for that, but these Bloodworkers come in and I make sure that I have a Keck Smash available for them and into a Blackout Kick. With Blackout Kick, I'm kind of hoping it hits those targets for threat, but it ended up being fine. And now we're slowly going to walk with these mobs. They're slowly going to come as long as we're making sure that we are kicking. But unfortunately, I think we stop kicking and it gets one final bolt out here right before it dies. Right now, I go to roll into the next pack. It stays alive between 2 million health and 0. It somehow got another cast off. Now, luckily, we were able to recover with a quick, Bark Skin, a rally, into a Shrink. This is a pretty scary pull. With something like a Havoc DH or any other class that can do a lot of funnel, like Arcane Mage, this pack isn't that bad. But when you have a comp like this that doesn't have a ton of funnel damage, this Bloodguard does live for quite a while, which means we can't get onto the boss as quickly. We were doing, actually, so this ended up being a Resilient key. You can crucify me in the comments if you want. So we ended up doing 2 or 3 attempts at this, and before we had a DK, we had a Havoc DH. These Havoc DHs, man, are wild. I didn't realize how broken their Reaver's Mark is when it comes to just getting rid of a big target. When we did this on this key earlier, we ended up wiping. Actually, I think on this boss, we just shit the bed for some reason. We were here a minute and a half faster, which was just freaking wild. And so, yeah, but this is a good comp too. It's just those Blood Guards, man, take so much time. They're efficient count, but they make everything else so much less efficient. And that's one thing to keep in mind whenever you're looking at MDT, is while a mob might have a good efficiency score in terms of its total health in relation to the percent it gives or the mob count it gives, when you start to factor in every other mob that's around it for its health threshold is taking significantly reduced damage, then it's not as efficient as it might appear on paper. Anyways, this guy's super easy. Also, since they improved his like visual animations or visual effects, it's really really easy not to get clipped by the frontal. It's not to get clipped by like the tornadoes that are spinning around. Pretty chill boss. A couple of tips though, for anyone who still happens to be doing keys this late in the season, is that you can aim the frontal. It's always going to target you, or it mostly targets you. Right after the burrowing charge, it will always target the player that it charges. So in this case, it'll target our Residrid with the first frontal. And then if you position yourself, you can actually aim it away from your group, which is kind of a nice little trick you can do to optimize your DPS's uptime, or essentially help them ignore a mechanic. You definitely don't want to be aiming it across the arena if you can. So basically aim the frontal at the wall. In this case, though, I am tanking in the middle of the room, and that's because I want to give our Druid as much time as possible to bait the boss away and still avoid the charge. This boss ends up just being pretty much a rinse and repeat, so nothing too crazy here. I think the goal is you want this boss to be dead around the 22-minute mark. If you can be heading downstairs with give or take 8 minutes left, that's like ideal. The last boss takes a little bit of time just because the downtime you end up having on the fight due to kind of like the suck-in, the cosmic singularity. Or is that what it's called? I think so, maybe. You definitely want to be clear. Now, we're going to be short percent as well, so we have a pretty big time loss. We probably could have finished this key without the deaths and without the missed count. We probably could have been under by about 2 or 2.5 minutes. But unfortunately, we had a couple of mistakes, which is A-okay. Once again, I'm going to try to position the frontal at the wall there so no one has to worry about dodging it. And then also make sure you are just paying attention to when the ads do spawn. They spawn generally right before the charge happens. Sometimes they'll spawn randomly though, like you just saw here. So I was able to get a quick taunt. But you want to get aggro pretty quickly. Because if they do happen to melee someone, it's probably lights out. I've had that happen before where a DPS or our healer just gets like actually slapped from behind, it critically strikes, and it just kills them. And so, yeah, being around 21 minutes right now, 22 is cutting it close. Like, we want more than enough time to be going down. And I decided right after this boss dies, I said, I have everything. Like, I have Dampen, Fort, Black Ox Brew. I also have Black Ox. I'm going to have Weapons of Order in 10 seconds. I have Soulbinder's Embrace, Diffuse, and Health Pot. I have everything. This pull can go to ship pretty quickly. If you miss a kick, it's just GG. Almost GG. So I'm really hoping that we're good about making sure we interrupt. So at this point, I was like, okay, I can either do 2 smaller pulls, but we might run the risk of not timing it. But we're going to have Call of the Wild, Avatar Wreck, and we're going to have Breath of Sindragosa with Pillar. We might as well go big. Go big or go home, you know? Now, don't get me wrong, Fury Warrior has like pseudo-capped damage. Their Reap the Storm is uncapped, but everything else in their kit is capped, so they have like a pretty hard drop-off when you're doing anything more than like 5 targets. But we're going to go big here. So I'm going to end up marking orange, and I'm going to ping it to try to let people know that I'm looking after that one. Now, I'm pretty quickly at 25 stacks, which I end up using Diffuse Magic on. And Diffuse Magic it reflects the dot back at the attacker. Now, here was one big blunder. I didn't use a defensive before I got stunned, and I almost died. Going up to 25 stacks is really scary. It does cap out at 25 stacks, just to let you know. But Diffuse Magic at 25 stacks does infinite damage to one of those drones, basically killing it. And I think right now, if I looked at my damage overall, it'd probably be give or take 20% of my overall damage in this pull. And so once I got stunned, I ended up kind of panicking and using some of my defensives back to back where I shouldn't. I think I used Fort and Dampen at the same time, which makes this part of the pull really, really, really scary. And so I'm trying to kite a little bit here. I know it's going out of the F-Low. Tiger's Lust comes up right now, so I can use it to dispel myself. But once my Tiger's Lust is gone, I am hoping and praying that the healer dispels me quick enough. Now, there's not a lot going on besides tank damage in this pull as long as we make sure we're getting kicks. Unfortunately, we ended up missing Star there. We quickly got some dispels. I couldn't really allocate a defensive there, though I did end up dispelling Deeps. Now, I kept the dot on me, but I felt like if there's no damage going on in the pull, the healer's already blasting into me, so I'm going to dispel someone else who shouldn't be taking damage. And finally, the pull ends up going down with all of my defensives used, and I got 2 uses of my Soulbinder's Embrace. So kind of glad I ran that trinket. It ended up doing a little bit of heavy lifting there. But I noticed right now, I'm like, ah, shit, we're short percent. I believe when I went back and looked, I missed 3 of the flyers at the start that kind of like hover over one of the edges. I just forgot to tag them. Not a big deal. It just means that instead of going into boss with like 5.5 minutes and no percent required, we are going to have to do a pull after boss. But the rest of this pull is going to be pretty chill. It's just a couple of carriers. And that's pretty much it. We probably could pull this onto boss. It's a little bit of group damage, but nothing that'll like one-shot anyone. But we're just going to play it safe here. Now, because we cleared this pack, we don't have to worry about not utilizing the entire room. So people can be pretty spread out here. There are comps or there are runs or routes that don't pull these carriers at all. And that means you need to play like half the room because the flyers will be kind of flying overhead. And if you're standing too close, they'll end up pulling. Here's that Cosmic Singularity. Brewmasters have it really easy. You can set up a Transcendence before the pull, or you can be like me and forget to transcend, so I end up placing it down. And then when you transcend back to the location, or when you transcend to that location, it leaves a new Transcendence from where you ported from. So ideally what you'll do is you'll move the boss a bit. You can see that my Transcendence is kind of up to the left-hand corner here, right above my kind of party plates, party frames. I'm now going to be able to transcend without having to replace that Transcendence down every single time, saving me a global over the course of the run, which is kind of convenient. One other thing that I did here is I targeted one of the bloods and I used Touch of Death. That procced Fatal Touch, giving me 5% more damage for 30 seconds. It's kind of a nice little trick you can do on a fights like this where there's just kind of throwaway adds, though you may want to save one of those for maybe the end of the fights if you want to Touch of Death for like execute or to quickly kill the boss, especially if the timer is really, really, really tight, but not a big deal. Now, like I said, I'm rusty, so I ended up not moving the boss here, which ended up meaning that I had to keep replacing down my Transcendence. So I did it right on the first one, but then I ended up kind of like keeping the boss planted in the middle of the room. Not a big deal. It's just a slight optimization thing you could make to make sure you can just optimize every little damage global to get as much damage out as possible. Now, when it comes to dispelling on this fight, there will be times I dispel and there's times I won't dispel. It depends on where the melee are positioned, so I have to like make sure they're both in a good spot. Or if it's on a healer, I want to make sure that it's not getting aimed right into the kind of the melee stack. Because again, with pugs, and especially without being in comms, you sometimes just never know what people are thinking in the moment, if they're tunneling, if they're not paying attention to who has the dispel. So right here, I wanted to dispel in melee, but it's clearly a clusterfuck. So I wait, and then once everyone's in their position, I then dispel our warrior. I felt like the DK had the option to death strike if he ever got low, and it being on me is like not a big deal. There's nothing really else to talk about here. So my best run before this actually was an 18, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. And we actually had 1 death in there, and we completed it with 25 minutes on the timer, being 5 minutes under. So pretty fast 18, but this was obviously a little bit of a step up. So my goal for this for the rest of the season, my goal is to get title. I want to push and get title. My current group, for those who haven't stopped by stream or don't know the Shaw lore, we're all kind of busy right now. A lot of them are playing other games, whether it's Remix, whether it's Fellowship, whether it's Path of Exile. And then for myself, it's more of a case of a lot of things to do with beta and alpha testing that I've been doing. I also played Fellowship a good bit. And then we are still progging Dimensius, which we're hoping to kill this week at the time of recording this video. And then we've kind of decided like, hey, let's take a breather. We're gonna be able to just like not play the game for like a month, and then we'll come back and we'll push towards the end of the season. So I hope to be doing more commentary videos as it progresses. Not really sure, but I felt like this was like a nice treat because I haven't been able to do a commentary in quite some time. Finishing up the last pull though, I just marked Skull to know that we can just focus this drone. It's the only percent we need. There's no reason to really AoE or cleave here, unless it benefits you. So yeah, that's kind of the plan for the season. I have recently also started, at least this last weekend, I was playing with another group who needed a tank. So if that goes well, I might post some commentaries there. But if not, it's going to be probably not until December where I start doing more commentaries for this season. So yeah, that was the key. I ended up at only 6.3 mil overall. I believe the 18 that I did actually earlier in the week ended up being 7 mil overall. So a little bit lower, but that's what happens when the Blood Guards live a lot longer and you're running a defensive trinket. So as you can see here, Soulbinder's Embrace ended up doing a little bit more than my Leech Healing at 5.7%, a little bit less than my Brand of Ceaseless Ire, which is actually kind of notable. The only big difference is that it's not doing 14% damage, it's doing 0.2% damage. So a sizable loss, but its main stat helped me stay alive. I'm not going to complain. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This was fun. This was a fun run, and I appreciate getting invited to it, obviously. Brazil keys are so bad. Anyways, I hope you guys are staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.